Good evening, everybody. I hope some of you didn't have to just live through our false start. Not really sure what happened with our restream system there, but you are watching Snow Goer Live, our new weekly TV or webcast show here on YouTube and also on Facebook Live. I'm your host, John Prusak from Snow Goer Magazine. We're going to talk about all things snowmobiling all the time on this show, whether we're talking about racing or trail riding or machines we're riding or vintage or really anything. If it pertains to making fun on snow, we'll talk about it here. So first, we want to thank our sponsors. Our sponsors again are Arctiva, maker of a full line of snowmobile apparel, whether that's jackets, bibs, boots, gloves, you name it. They've got everything you need at arctiva.com. We're also sponsored by their sister brand, Z1R. Z1R makes a full line of snowmobile helmets. They also make a bunch of stuff for the motorcycle industry, and they can be found at z1r.com. And then our third sponsor, which is brand new this week, is Gates. Gates is promoting their G-Force belts. They're a full line of drive belts for the power sports industry, not just your snowmobiles, but also your side-by-sides, your ATV. Heck, they make stuff for golf carts and electric bikes nowadays. So they can be found at gates.com. So for those of you who are regular watchers, I told you last week when we signed off with Bobby Donahue and with PJ Wanderscheid that I was going riding the next morning in the UP. Well, didn't work out quite the way I planned. We got a few miles in, but some mechanical problems shortened our day. But that just means we got to Eagle River faster. So then we got down to Eagle River for the World Championship Snowmobile Derby, where we just had a fantastic weekend of racing for everybody except for the defending champion, Matt Gady, I should say. He got roughed up a couple times. But on Friday, in the Friday Night Thunder program, Blaine Stevenson, a four-time ex-champion, kind of mopped up in both Pro Champ and in Formula 3. Throughout the weekend in that Formula 3 World Championship class, really four guys had separated themselves from the rest of the pack. It was Stevenson, it was Gady, it was Zach DeWald, and it was Joey Birch. Those were the four. There was the four big, and then there was a bunch of other really fast racers who any other year would be highly competitive, but those top four had really separated themselves. Talking to people in town on after we made our tip sheet on Saturday night, people were asking me, who do you think is going to win? And even though Stevenson was fast qualifier, so he was our top, in our odds sheet, he had the lowest odds, I guess it would be. I said, I think that the trophy's going back to Michigan, and sure it did. Zach DeWald was a survivor. There was a really interesting final. There was chaos a couple times, a couple red flags, a couple restarts. But at the end of the day, the guy who led every lap and deserved to win won the race. Zach DeWald was flawless, and his Troy Pierce built sled was the one to beat, and that's the guy who took it. So despite all the chaos behind him, and also almost getting taken out by a lapped sled, the right winner will put his name on the Snow Goer Cup. The also great racing all weekend, Formula 3, Enduros, Outlaws, a whole bunch of different classes, had lots of entries. It was a really impressive crowd. And the way the Derby is set up now, it doesn't always do justice to the crowd, because what's called the hot seats, the indoor seating, were packed. They were absolutely slammed packed, and very hot, by the way. I went in there with all my gear on from being in the infield and practically baked. But so, in the video that you see on Flow Racing, you might not see a lot of people standing on the hill, but there was a lot of people there, a lot of positive energy, a lot of stuff going on. So really, really good time. But let's get to our guest this week. And while we're talking racing, let's stick with racing. I'm going to bring in somebody whose last name will probably sound familiar to anybody who was interested in the sport in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s or right up to today. The last name is Schubitzke. Our guest is Carl Schubitzke, joining us live from Deadwood, South Dakota. How are things looking in South Dakota these days, Carl?
It's actually great. I mean, to be honest with you, there's a lot of snow out here, which is a pleasant surprise. And I always have a soft spot. It's a really cool event, really cool just area, something that not only myself, but a lot of the crew and people look forward to seeing every year. So we're excited to be back. I'm excited. And the smaller track makes for good racing. Some of the racers don't like it because it is smaller, but it definitely does make for like action-packed. You kind of never know who's going to win because it's such a different track that if a guy gets out front, gets clean air, it's hard to catch. I'm looking forward to getting everything started tomorrow.
Yeah, it's and there's been so many really benchmark races that have been held there as far as big victories, come from behind victories and things like that. The big Tucker Hibbert victory. We'll get to that. We'll put Deadwood kind of on the side right now. Let's go back before we go forward. So when I started with Snow Week way back in '93, which yes, I started there when I was 10. There were I can't claim that I knew a lot about snowmobile racing, but there were a few names that I knew. I knew the name Eastman. I knew the name Thorson. There were names like that. Villeneuve I knew, and one of the names I knew was Schubitzke because of old Fast Eddie Schubitzke, the 1976 world champion. If my math is right, though, by the time young Carl came along, your father was already retired from racing, correct?
Yeah, for sure. And what's kind of weird is, like, obviously I started racing when I was 6, motorcycles, and kind of got into more snowmobiles when I got a little bit older. But my dad never really talked about his racing. He didn't have any machines. So it's kind of like when I got older, I'm like, why didn't you keep that stuff or have that stuff around? Like, he always supported me racing, but it wasn't like, okay, this is Carl, this is what we're going to do at a young age. You're going to race. Like, we're just going to do this. And it was more like, hey, if I liked it, he had my back 100%. And so it was cool. So, like, obviously, and then I raced pretty much my whole life with, like, him at my side, or, so I was pretty fortunate in that way.
Even though he was done racing by the time, you were coming through the system, did you still get a sense, like, even when you started racing, where people were like, hey, that's Eddie Schubitzke's son?
Yeah.
I mean, was there a kind of a weird sense
for
there?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. And I don't know, like, my dad has that way about him of, if you meet him, you probably won't forget him. He's always, like, joking around, always having a good time. And I laughed to him that I always had to be the father figure, and he always was a kid that I had to, like, make sure he got home on time and make sure he made it home. But no, he, obviously he created a lot of friends, and that's kind of why, like, I love racing, is just a lot of friends and family. No matter how big the industry is, it's a family environment that you just create those relationships, and you remember them for a long time.
Yeah, I was able to dig up a couple pictures out of our photo archives. Here's a picture of him on one of his Yamahas. I had the other one that came up where he was with one of the Trap Boys. A couple of years ago, Greg Marier from Yamaha came over to my office, and I think we scanned in like 20,000 slides from back in the day, because all our slide photography was basically to rotting in binders, and I didn't want to lose the history. And so, some of the stuff from the 90s and early 2000s, I remember that stuff, but some of the stuff we were able to dig up from the 80s or 70s was really kind of neat. And then, of course, we go to this guy here. We were discussing off air earlier. You were rather nomadic in your career. You raced for anybody who'd hand you a contract.
Well, fortunately, I did. I raced a long time. So again, I raced kind of every brand, a lot of great people, a lot of great teams and stuff like that. Honestly, there wasn't one bad instance, and I was fortunate. Like, honestly, I was very, very fortunate to race a long time, meet a lot of people, race for a lot of cool, individuals and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, again, it was. And I still, like, obviously I love it. I'm still around it on a daily basis. So it's in my blood, and I do enjoy it. So I'm a fortunate guy.
Let's go back to this picture. It kind of looks like your feet are elevating maybe faster than the sled. You got any explanation for any tips or riding style for young?
Maybe that was like right before I crashed or something. I don't know. But yeah, I like to think that, okay, it was all set up. But no, those were a lot of fun years. I spent a lot of time, like, living in Wausau, because that's where the players department was. And again, like, created great friendships by living there and staying there and, racing for them.
So when you look back at your own career, are there a couple of benchmark moments or things that you really harken back to where you're like, well, that was really, I'll always remember this day or that day?
Not so much, just more of, like, it's just racing in general. Like, you get away from it. You get away from the track. How, like, if I get bored on a weekend if I'm not at the track, and just like X Games and even the teams and just all the experiences that honestly you take kind of for granted until the time passes. It's one of those scenarios where you don't know what you got till it's gone. So, like, my big thing is, like, just trying to tell anyone and everyone, like, enjoy whatever you're doing, because you don't know what tomorrow brings. But like there isn't a bunch of stuff that sticks. So, because like honestly, just being on the road with like laughing and the memories like that, there isn't like one set thing that like, oh, I was so happy I did this or so happy I did that. Like literally, it's just this montage of like just great experiences that I was fortunate to be part of.
I've talked to other people about this, and Shearing and I have gone back and forth on this, Steve Shearing, a couple times, just about the fact that, you know, racing is such a community, and I don't think a lot of people who watch it realize that, you know, you got this group of people that are travel kind of together, and you see each other on the road, and that ends up being such a tight friend circle, oftentimes for the rest of your life, even though you might be rivals on the track. You know, as soon as the machines are shut down, some of your best friends are there.
Yeah, I honestly, like I said it today to a bunch of our guys because they're like, holy man, the logistics of everything. I'm like, yeah, it's a traveling circus. Yeah. Like it's the truth. And even people that you may have issues with or a rocky relationship after a couple of years, you grow older and you joke around and now you're close friends or whatever. So it is a close-knit group. And the thing I love about racing is like more so than other sports because, you know, brothers and sisters and it is family oriented. Like no matter what you say or not, if you're racing snowmobiles, it takes a family to go, where a lot of other sports and stuff like that, like if Johnny's playing basketball or Sarah's swimming or whatever, you know, the parents are obviously going to be there and come, but maybe the family doesn't. Like racing's kind of like all in on the family. Like unfortunately or fortunately, it's expensive. It's a lot of traveling where you know, if you're going, you're kind of going together, which again, like I was kind of showing the light on that by a couple like smart individuals, a lot smarter than me. And it just basically said like, this is the greatest experience I get because I get to spend time with my family, like pure and simple. So that's what I want to do. So yeah, I mean, again, like it's, and it all comes back to like snowmobile, and it's obviously a sport that I cherish and I love, and it's just a really, really cool thing. And there's a lot of positives.
Yeah. I remember talking to, I think it might have been Chris Carlson who was talking with this about me years ago. And he was saying, yeah, not many teenage boys want to hang out with their dad on weekends. If your son's a racer, you want to hang out with your dad on weekends, and it just changes everything.
You know? For sure. I was just talking to a friend. His kid turned 16. He hasn't seen him. Hasn't seen him in a week. And he's like, you know, that's just life. And that's totally normal. But like again, if your kid's going racing or whatever, you're gonna hang out with mom and dad because you're gonna come to the track and all that stuff. And again, it's just kind of I don't know. Again, it's just it's a lot of positives. A lot of positives that been unfortunate. And like again, you guys, you're wrapping up the World Championship. We get to go back there for a snowcross race, which I'm excited to be in. But like, man, I have so many memories there. Being in the motorhome on the track side, like that was one of the best weekends ever growing up as a kid because it was just fun. We just go and play and hang out all weekend or whatever. And again, like those are my memories. So I you know, look kindly upon like obviously
So you were one of those kids on the front stretch. It's always sliding down the hill and kind of icing that hill. That was you.
Yeah. Like literally, I don't even know. I laugh. I don't know how my dad got the spot, but we had an RV on. It has to be corner 3 the entire weekend. So we literally went there for, it felt like the whole week, but as a kid, maybe it was only 2 or 3 days, but we were there with 30 people in the RV. I mean, people everywhere, cousins, you know, and all weekend long, just sledding on the hill, running around, getting stickers are the biggest thing ever. Just walking around to every tent to get a sticker and just like all that stuff. And I remember like the one year, the race in the kitty cat in the middle was like revolutionary, you know, like it was a big thing as a kid. So like, again, like, so I you know, I look at the kids nowadays and I'm like, man, that's cool. Like, again, I tell them in the riders meetings, just like a Canterbury last race of like, it's cool what you guys are doing, man. Like it's cool. You could be playing basketball. You could be playing hockey. You could be doing a lot. You could be literally kids just playing video games at home. Unfortunately, like it's cool that they're all racing. It's cool that they're doing something active with their family. I'm a fan of it. So
quick story related to when you said the kitty cats in the front stretch. One specific memory for me, and if I had to guess, I'd probably go 98, 99, somewhere in there. As the Snow Week guy, The kitty cats have the, they're going just in the little front stretch. And so I back up from where they're normally turning, and I lay my chest down on the ice so I can get the camera as low as possible to get a cool looking shot to make the kitty cats look really big. And on the one lap, the guy who's in the lead suddenly, I don't know how he got all crossed up, but all of a sudden he's in the air and he's coming straight for me, and I got to scramble out of the way. Well, because I got the picture, although it was out of focus, the hood of the sled said Big Nick. Well, that was Nick Van Strydank, who went on to win 2 world championships himself. So I got run over by Nick Van Strydank before he was a world champion.
Well, I kind of blame you, John. That's a lot of courage to be laying down in front of a bunch of little kids on snowmobiles. I mean, that's a lot of courage, because I know, like, I see them all the time. It's like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, no,
there's a very thin line between a lot of courage and a lot of stupidity. It's somewhere, very dash line.
Well, you're alive to tell it. So, hey, it worked out.
So what causes you to finally hang up the race bib, and then how do you get involved with the ISOC race circuit?
Just old and slow. I mean, like, yeah, you'd like to name a million things, but that's just reality. Like, you get older, you get slower. It's a young man's game. These kids, and I'm not a denier of, like, the level gets raised each and every year. It's just the talent and just so many kids doing it. These guys are so fast nowadays. But that, and then I kind of got into construction and doing other stuff. And I went to school at the end of my career because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But literally, I just emailed John and I, because I obviously still want to be involved with racing. Right. Don Daniels, the owner, and he said, "Yeah, let's try it out." So I was like a race director for a year, and then now this is 15 years later. So it's kind of crazy how it all unfolded, and I'm so grateful and happy he gave me the opportunity, and so happy I reached out to him because, again, like, it's not lost, but just like, I liked racing. I wanted to be around racing and work other jobs and everything like that were cool, and they're fine, but obviously I had a
and who would have thought that would, you got exactly one job of one. I mean, there's not a lot of people that are running the national snowcross circuit and then the national truck racing circuit, which we can jump into that for a second. I don't know if a lot of our viewers are big snowmobile people. I don't know if they know that you guys also run the big off-road circuit now that travels all over the country as well. So this isn't a part-time winter job for you.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a year round, but a lot of in the summer, we're doing like TV shows and things like that. But obviously, I have a soft spot for racing, so got reached. It was kind of a long time coming, but about 5 years ago, we took over the off-road series, and that's been great and fun and awesome and a lot of positivity. So it is like year round. So now we go pretty much from December until December till end of September. So we have 8 events during the winter and then 8 events during the summer. And again, a lot of the same attributes in off-road racing, very family oriented, very close-knit group and everything like that. And it's really cool. I mean, it's a cool form of racing. And again, like, if it has a motor, and I'm all in. So it's a good mix.
I'm the same way. I've been to your races a couple of times out at ERX, and that is just a tremendous good time. I think I've been to about probably 15 different types of racing, from off-road boats to motocross to whatever. It's the same thing. If it turns gas into noise and speed, I'm in. Let's go. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, again, and that's what I kind of find. Like, we get a lot of like partners, and what's the demo? It's like, well, if you're into motorsports, you probably have like a 4-wheeler or motorcycle or snowmobile, or you got a truck. It's definitely that genre. Like, if you're into one, you're usually into the 10 other
absolutely.
Things.
So again, you're watching Snow Goer Live. Our guest is Carl Schubitzke, who runs the ISOC Amsoil Championship Snocross series. I believe the official title is president. Our show is sponsored by Arctiva, Z1R, and Gates Belts. So let's bring people up to today. Well, let's go to something you brought up earlier. There's all the race teams that go out there, but in talking to you, I don't know, several years ago now, I didn't realize how big a team of people who are somehow associated with the race circuit have to sweep into town, from corner workers to people setting up displays inside, the tech people. I mean, how many people are part of the ISOC team that go into a town when you go to race at a place like Deadwood?
Yeah, it's 70 to 90, depending on the size of the event. So it's crazy. And again, like you just find amazing people. Like, like you find an amazing group that are really into it, that really love it. And we're fortunate that like after a long time, you kind of build a community and they tell their friends, and usually the referrals are good guys too. But yeah, I mean, you look at like just even the TV side, you're 15 to 20 there, the track crew, another 20 there. So again, it adds up, like with any big event, there's a lot of costs associated with just traveling that many people, as you can imagine, flying them or getting them here and everything like that. So it's been going really, really good. And the team that we have is kind of, I guess, well-trained because we've been doing it a long time. For the most part, we have the same cameramen. So what I mean by that is like your head cameraman, if we say we need, Elias or Imaha or whoever, he knows exactly who it is. It isn't some guy that we just hire and he has no idea what racing is, but he's a good cameraman. So a lot of the crew has just, been around a long time, has a lot of experience. And that's been super nice because it takes a lot of the weight off my shoulders of just the stress of it all. Like, okay, well, this event should run good. And of course there's always fires to put out and there's always things to do. And you always want to make every event better, but it's been, we've been very, very fortunate on our team. It's like, honestly, I love them. They're like family to me because they're the people that I work with. And then that like goes above and beyond, like the teams and the crews, man, these mechanics and everybody works so hard, spend so much time. And I feel bad. Like if you have a bad night at the track and it's like all that work, and just have like maybe a bad pick on starts, so you get bad starts. So there's just a lot of people that work really hard that kind of don't get the glorification that quite honestly they should. But fortunately, hopefully, they have a good time and a lot of good memories, and someday they get that recognition, or maybe their team starts winning or whatever. That's just always cool to see that type of excitement or environment come
That's just the logistics of traveling 70 to 90 people around to get them into a race and having everybody do a function. Yeah, it's that definitely sounds like a challenge. Well, it's as far as the racing itself, you raced in an era where, especially earlier in your career, there were so many entries in each one of the pro classes, and there'd be so many people, just entered in Pro 440 or Pro 600 or Pro Open or whatever. And so just making the final was an incredible feat. Those times have changed. We don't have the same numbers, but I think what a lot of people tend to miss is that the racing itself is as exciting as ever. I mean, it's, I hear people all the time harken back to, Kirk Hibbert this, Brad Pake that, then they get into Tucker versus Blair and all that sort of stuff. But there are great rivalries today if people will just kind of give it a chance, right?
Well, honestly, we were just talking about today on the pro class, there's a lot of guys who can win. So the racing is amazing. And then you look at our younger classes. I mean, some of the classes like last year had 71 kids and stuff. So, I mean, the sport, like, is it as big as it maybe ever was? Maybe not, but it's still really, really strong. Our entries were up at Canterbury and stuff. And there's still a lot of, kids that want to get into racing because, again, it's really cool. It's a form of racing, like motocross or anything. It's a really cool sport. So fortunately, we can appeal to that. And so the entries to my expectations have been very, very good. They could have been a lot worse. And like back to your point of, we have 99 races, I think, on Saturday here. So there's a ton of racers, ton of races. And like at the top level, again, you have 6 or 7 guys that can win, which always makes it exciting.
Yeah. I remember either having that many race entries was always interesting. But boy, I mean, I remember being at the Deadwood Snocross until 2 a.m. some years, just on Friday, just trying to get the classes knocked down to a reasonable size. So now you get to see the top pros race 3 times in this program on 2 different days. And so it's, there are good parts of the kind of creating these efficiencies as well.
For sure.
I was at Canterbury a couple weekends ago when you were there. What an event. Great crowd, awesome track. You guys built a tremendous track. Great racing. Is that still kind of the pinnacle race that is kind of the what you guys call the Daytona 500 of your sport?
For sure. I mean, New York does extremely well, and I think Duluth will build it back up. Deadwood always does well here, but it's not that large, to be honest with you. Canterbury, what Canterbury does, and I wish we could have it at every single event, is indoor seating, make people comfortable. It really excels in that. So that way they can enjoy and have a really good time and experience. They can still go outside and watch their favorite, races and everything like that, experience it, smell it, taste it. But it's just, it's a one-of-a-kind venue. And for Snocross specifically, it just kind of fits real well. But yeah, like attendance was way up this year because the weather was decent. Usually Canterbury's negative 18. So again, kind of the stars aligned. And it was like, we're very, very, very happy.
The other thing, and this is a mixed bag for me being a promoter of snowmobiling, nobody in the Twin Cities can ride right now. So it's like, well, I want to do something snowmobiling related. There's this great race going on at Canterbury. Let's go, so that quite frankly, if there would have been closer snow, you wouldn't have seen me there. I would have been out chasing snowflakes myself.
No, I think there's definitely something to be said about that because, always in the lower snows, we have higher attendance at the events because, like you said, they can't go riding. They still want to come out and experience their hobby or their
the other thing that I mentioned when I was out there with my coworker Mark was how when you look at the track now, it is so neon white compared to the snert that you guys oftentimes were riding on. It's the way your guys' ability to make a bunch of snow now is so much better than when it was how many different parking lots can we plow and how much crap are we going to get in each shuffle.
I know. And I remember a lot of races where there were like shopping carts and things like that. And we're definitely not perfect though, bud. Like, I mean, there's a lot of tracks that still get dirty just because of the snow and everything. But fortunately we have like a good crew that makes really good snow. And, when we get the weather, like that's another catch. Like it costs a lot of money, but if you catch the weather, you can make a lot of good snow because when it's pristine, white like that, a big track, there's nothing better. And that's kind of like what we always want to provide and always want to give. But unfortunately, sometimes, the restrictions, you just can't.
In our comments section, the famous Mark Mondas of Mondas Brothers Racing says that he thinks the 1973 world champ and his son should put a Yamaha oval vintage sled together and race at the Vintage World Championship one of these years. So the Mondas families.
That'd be cool. Like I'd be down for that. It's just so I would have like, hey, if he beats me, he could have bragging rights for the rest of his life. And if I beat him, I could give him, some harassing or whatever. Like, I think it'd be really cool. I think it'd be fun. We're always competitive with each other. Like, I mean, go-karting or whatever. So like, I'm all in on that. Like that would be a lot. And to me, like, I would just love it. I think it'd be the funnest thing ever. So I'd be down. I'd be in.
We're actually going to talk all things vintage with our next guest, Ron Fesko, here in a little bit. But it is amazing how popular that vintage thing is, and even now, I mean, it's amazing how more current as you get older vintage is. Some of that the racing that Levi's involved with and stuff with the sleds from the '90s has become so popular, and that's cool to see. Just anybody getting out and having fun with the sport.
Yeah. It is. And I'll be the first to say it. The older I get, the more nostalgic I get. So I want things I used to have for either the memories or whatever. And and deservedly so. It's really cool. So I hope it grows and stays forever. And quite honestly, it will. Like, I don't think, I don't know. I don't see how it could go away because I see things like, Ditch Banger and stuff doing extremely well. And it's affordable, just really, really cool. To me, if I saw like a 1976 Yamaha 440, like obviously my dad won the world championship on that. Like I have a lot of memories of that. So like it, again, like, stuff like that is real.
But it's also really fun to see how the 90s stuff now has become so hot that all of a sudden people want stuff from the 90s. It's
well, 90s was a long time ago. Unfortunately, like 90s seems like 5 years ago. But it was a lot longer than that. So like, it's crazy that I don't know, 90 seems like 5 years ago, but in reality,
I just can't figure out how the 90s can be that long ago. But guys like you and I haven't aged at all. So that's the thing I'm having.
I agree. I agree. It's amazing. I don't know. It must be a lot of agree.
All right. Well, Give me one last plug for this weekend before I spin you loose so you can get back to work. What should people expect to see in this weekend in Deadwood?
Well, obviously, it's a smaller track, so it'll be tight, exciting racing. There'll be a lot of roofs and stuff like that. So if you haven't been out, you should really come. This whole area, the mountains, and just kind of the backdrop and the way that the sleds echo against the mountains. It's just a really, really, really cool experience. It's usually warm, which is obviously great. But we have a lot of other events coming up. Valcourt, New York. If you can't make it out to Deadwood, just come on an event. And I hope, like, my ultimate goal is that you just have a good time and create those great memories of going to races with families or friends, and hopefully keep
whether
that.
You catch a circuit at ERX or up in Duluth or in at New York or Michigan, or every year Eagle River this year has been added. It's a traveling road show, and if it gets close to you, you got to go check it out, because racing is fun anyway. But in person, it's just such a better cut above. I love watching it on flow, but then when you get there and you can feel the engines,
That's different.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carl, for joining us. We're going to spin you loose and put you back to work building a perfect track out there in Deadwood.
Right.
I'll be watching on flow when I'm not riding.
All right, take care, and thank you for
thanks for joining us. See ya. So we'll cut Carl loose. And again, you're watching Snow Goer Live. I'm your host, John Prusak. Our sponsors are the following: Z1R, maker of a full line of snowmobile helmets as well as motorcycle helmets and motorcycle accessories. They can be found at z1r.com. Also, we're sponsored by Arctiva. Arctiva makes a complete line of snowmobile accessories and gear. If you're looking for bibs, jackets, boots, gloves, mid layers, head socks, whatever you're looking for, Arctiva has it, and it can be found at arctiva.com. And then this week, we've added a new sponsor in Gates. Gates with their G-Force Power Sports driveline belts. They make them for snowmobiles, obviously. They also make them for your other power sports equipment. You can read all about them at gates.com. So as we were talking with Carl there, the vintage thing has taken off, although the definition of vintage kind of changes. This coming weekend, for those of us in the upper Midwest, it's what we always used to call Waconia weekend, because the event, the Midwest ride-in, was always in Waconia. Now it's at the ERX Motor Park in Elk River, but it's the big daddy of things, all things vintage up here. But I've got a good friend out in upstate New York that is a vintage junkie himself. I'd like to bring him in. This, my friends, is Ron Fesko, live from basically suburban Syracuse, New York, we'll say. How you doing, Ron?
Doing well, John. How about yourself?
Well, I'm alive and kicking.
Hey, good to be here. Good to be here, and good to be with everybody that's on the broadcast today.
So you guys have been kind of hogging some of our snow this year. You ever going to back up some of those storms and have them come back and fill our swamps and fields?
I can control just a few things, but not the weather, John. But we'd like to, because north of us has got 4 or 5 feet recently. Tug Hill area and up there, unbelievable how much snow they got. So good for them. And we got enough about here where I am west of Syracuse, maybe a foot or so. But at least the ground's white and it makes it look like there. And you can go out and putt around a little bit, even here where I am.
Yeah, it's been incredible. Wow, you guys having some of those lake effect storms. It's just incredible seeing some of the numbers. There's a website where you can check every day and see where snowfall fell in the last 24 hours, and I check it every day because I'm a snow freak. But it was one day yesterday where 70 inches fell just inside the lake there. It's like 70 inches of snow in one day. That's so awesome. Yeah, but
being right into Lake Ontario there, there are areas that used to get 250, 300 inches of snow a year.
Yeah,
just unbelievable. But
well, I know you guys had a couple bad winters in a row, so hopefully we're going to get you guys going again out there. Let's get to your story. So let's just talk about snowmobiling in general first. So how did you find the sport, or the sport find you?
Well, it's funny. The sport found me kind of, because in our neighborhood, the first sled that was ever around was a Johnson ski horse.
Nice.
So after watching it run around the neighborhood one year, I convinced my dad that we needed a snowmobile around Christmas time. So I had an uncle and one that sold AMF, and another uncle sold Alouettes within 10 miles of our house. Okay. So we decided on an AMF 15 horse J-Lo engine. and the other neighbor got a Ski-Doo. So I was out with him all the time.
Okay.
And from then. So then as it goes on at, and let's see, 1970, I went to work for a distributor in Syracuse named Allen and Creer, and they had AMF snowmobiles and Cushman golf cars and utility vehicles.
Okay.
So we started out, so that lined up with us having an AMF. We actually ended up getting the 70 AMF.
Okay.
So next thing they know, AMF got out of the business, went Harley Davidson. So they didn't have a distributorship anymore. Motoski was available, so they took on Motoski.
Okay.
Well, I convinced my dad, maybe we should have a Motoski dealership. The heck with the uncle's sleds. Let's us compete a little bit with them. So from a 2-car garage, we put on another 2-car garage. So basically right at the house, one 2-car garage was the showroom. The other one was parts and service. And I'm working for the distributor. It's real easy for me to bring home sleds, parts.
Nice.
So my life was either at the distributor working where I delivered sleds, unloaded sleds from the factory, loaded sleds for people when they came in, parts, or I delivered sleds. So that was my life, from there.
Yeah.
In it was the 72 model year. We started our dealership till 77.
Okay.
And that was it, man. Snowmobiling was it, and that's what we did.
Once it gets in your blood, man, it doesn't leave. For the way you're cropped right now, people probably can't see, but there's a Motoski across Ron's chest. There's a Motoski in that picture in the background in his camera, and he's got a fleet of them. That's where I first met Ron, was at the Big East show when he was showing off some of his Motoskis in the basement of the old Om Center. So that Motoski has not left him. So when did you start collecting snowmobiles and restoring snowmobiles and all that?
Okay, so as the years went on, we got rid of the dealership. I was busy raising a family, working, so I didn't snowmobile much at all during that time. 2001, I went to the Whiteout when the Whiteout was north of Syracuse.
Okay.
And Motoski happened to be the featured sled. And this true story, I'm walking in with my brother. We're going as spectators. And here's a guy unloading 2 Motoskis off an open trailer.
Okay.
So I have to go over and see, hey, what's going on here? Says, you're bringing them into the show? They're Motoskis. He goes, well, I'm unloading them. I'm going to sell them. So he had 73 F440.
Oh.
That was the Motoski when they changed over, moved the engine up front, aluminum chassis, 17. And so basically did a lot of things that Arctic Cat had on their sleds.
Yeah.
He fires it up and it's running. He says, well, it's for sale. I says, well, what do you got to have? He said, $450. I said, will you take $350? Yep. So I bought the sled, wrote it into the show, put it in the lineup with the Motoskis. And I'm telling the people I know, Motoski people, I go, I just bought this. They go, get out of here. I go, I just bought it off this guy's trailer. So that started my collection then. And from there on, I've been collecting ever since and have 20 plus that are show ready. 2 mini bikes, Motoskeeter mini bikes. And any good vintage guy has got to have a few in the background you're working on. So
absolutely,
there's 4 or 5 more I've got in the pipeline to try and get done. So
I'm going to kind of ask you to speak on behalf, I guess, of pretty much all people who are vintage restorers and collectors. I mean, what's the draw? What do you think pulls people like you and all the people you interact with in this wacky part of your life? What pulls you all in?
Well, John, it takes you back to what you did. Okay. Yeah. And what I found too, besides going to shows, promoting shows, putting them on, a lot of the people you talk to, they either had a dealership or they worked at a dealership. How many people, I worked at the Ski-Doo guy, the Ski-Doo dealer. I worked at this. Okay. And once it's in your blood, I don't care. You can collect, I always say you can collect vintage underwear, whatever, it's vintage, and people start at it. But the whole snowmobile thing, you find that the people were snowmobilers forever and have been around it. So, and a lot of great people, the guy before you just have a great group of people that you end up meeting and you all have the same thing in common. Vintage sleds,
Absolutely. So we'll get into this more in a little bit, but for those who don't know, Ron runs the Big East Classic Snowmobile Show at our Big East Snowmobile Show that we hold out in Syracuse every year. And he also has a winter show. Like I said, we'll cover those in a little bit. But in general terms, through you, I always get every year to interview the person who's the best of class winner or the best of show winner, somebody who's really got an outstanding machine. And it's always kind of one of my favorite interviews of the year because every time there's a story, and oftentimes that story, it goes back to, 60 years ago, 50 years ago, I had this. Yeah. And then it goes back to 3 years ago, I found this chassis and I've been working on this project for 3 years. And I don't know where people like you find your dedication to work on one project that long. I don't think I have it, but God bless you guys that you have it.
Yeah. And, we've been lucky the last 2 years at our Syracuse, our Big East Classic show. Mm-hmm. The last 2 years, the sleds that won Best of Show, they were the first time they were ever displayed after these guys working on them. And if you remember Joe Clark from Canada the year before, 9 to 10 years on that Ski-Doo, he measurements and taken, because there's only a few of them made and raced, and so I feel fortunate when we have a sled like that no one's seen before. Absolutely. Because after a while, everybody kind of brings the same sled. So it's really worked out well for us. And
And to me, the other thing that's so neat about and again, technically now sleds of the 90s, up till 2000 now are now technically vintage. If you go by a 25-year timeline, I know some people go 20, but still, to me, the golden age, the sleds, especially from the 70s, there were so many brands and there was so much personality in the snowmobiles back then, and it was just when you think you've seen it all, you see something else, some other brand you never heard of, some other model you've never heard of, some weird race machine. It's fascinating.
And not everybody, most are dedicated to a brand, but then you have the rare guy that brings a little bit of everything, and he just collects every brand. And John, you were in the business world, as was I, out in sales and stuff. And even with the newer sleds, when you met somebody, or a customer or whatever, and they go, "Oh yeah, I snowmobile." You know what the next question is? What do you ride?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And for as far as the trail sleds go, I've always ridden Ski-Doo, but hey, they're all good and great. But you remember doing that? Go, "Oh yeah, you ride? What do you ride?"
Yeah, absolutely. that brand loyalty runs deep.
Oh, it does. It does.
Almost as bad as our pickup trucks. But that's another case.
Nearly.
So some of the projects that you hear of, oftentimes there's a part or a piece or something like that holds people up. What's the tough stuff to find? I've heard tracks in recent years have been hard to find. What are some other components that people typically search everywhere to find?
Tracks and the engine parts for the older engines are becoming more and more difficult because as this has gone on over the years, people that were collectors and if they're serious, they'll spend the money and they've bought up all this stuff. So it's really, engine parts, sleds that were made only a few years, that were kind of rare and odd. Man, for you to find some of the parts for them. I remember I've sold a lot of sleds over the years supporting my habit. So I had an old snow scoot, not a Yamaha, but the ones before that.
Okay.
So I had a few parts left. I bought it. The chassis was rotted so bad. The guy that came and bought the parts from me, he goes, "You had a chassis?" I said, "Yeah, it was bad." But he said, "I might have been able to have one duplicated from the measurements, Ron. You should have never got rid of it."
I was just waiting for you.
Yeah, exactly. So, I got to plug my phone in here. Hang on a sec.
All right. Well, while you're doing that, my sales guy, Mark Rosacker, through the chat says to say hello to you. And we also had a Dan Skopfich, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, who proudly proclaims that his very first snowmobile was a 1970 moto ski with a 340 Sax in it. So
my type of guy right there.
Yeah, there's a guy that holds your affliction.
Yeah, 70 grand free with 340 Sax SS. Great engine, great sled. I'm a little prejudiced,
So I've heard there's some dispute in the vintage industry that now you can get some parts kind of reproduced, you can get some things done with 3D printing and things like that. In one sense, it lets people finish their projects, but another perspective now is not really original. Where do you stand on that back and forth?
I have a lot of originals in my collection, and the old saying, they're only original once.
Yeah.
But if you can't get the part, you're going to complete the project somehow. And you've looked and looked, you're going to go, I got to do it. I got to let it be done,
Yep. So how does this lead to you hosting shows? How do you end up being a guy that is in charge of pulling one of these things together?
Club I belong to, a guy I knew was president of the club, and he asked me, it was Toad Hollow Riders, south of Syracuse.
Okay.
I mentioned to him, let's put on a show. So being involved with the club, that's the first show I ever really went and promoted.
Yeah.
And did that for like 8 years, and do a couple others now and then, and got hooked up with you through the Big East show.
Yeah.
And I just enjoy doing it and being there. I judge the national shows, which is a great time, and attend them. And by the way, the show is in Dunkirk, New York. This year it's back to the East Coast, the VSCA show.
Yeah.
Right off the thruway, we should end up drawing some people from Ohio, PA, it's kind of on that end of the state over there. So should be really good. They've got a great location. So a little plug for that one. And that's the third week in June, I believe.
Okay, very good.
But it's all online. You look VSCA, just look it up and it's all there.
While we're plugging shows, this weekend, as I said earlier, we've got the Midwest Ride-In, which is the show of shows to those of us of the winter shows to those of us here in the Upper Midwest. I know you've got the Great Eastern a whiteout coming up in Fulton,
Yes,
New York.
Whiteouts in Fulton, and that's a continuation of the show I went to in 2001. The
Okay.
Whiteouts moved from spot to spot. At one time, it was a Rolling Wheels Raceway right here down the road from me in Elbridge.
Okay.
It was a 5/8 mile dirt track. So it was there. So it kind of moved around, but the whiteout goes on every year. And it's really the biggest show on the East Coast, vintage show, So
Very good.
I'll be there.
So let's talk about the two shows that you're associated with. So what have we done? The Big East Classic now for 4 years, I believe, at the Big East show. So that's always the first weekend of October. Typically about 100, give or take, entries in a bunch of different classes. Well, what do you enjoy about doing that one?
That one is good. And we do 15 different classes. Just tell people the way I run a show is first through third trophies, dash blacks, best of show, so on and so forth. That show is a little different. And you had some pictures earlier you had.
Yeah, I'll put them up while you're talking.
Able to bring up. But our show there, we do, is in a huge, beautiful parking lot. There's a picture, and it's a little different. Most vintage shows, you pull up with your truck, you unload your trailer, leave your truck and trailer there, and there's the sleds. Well, you can see in that picture right there, our sleds get unloaded, lined up, and the vehicles are taken away. And it's an awesome display in front of the expo center there at the New York State Fairgrounds. So that's a little different. And you see the weather. For 4 years, we've lucked out with no rain and great weather. So whatever we're doing in that respect, it's really working.
You better find some wood to knock on, my friend.
I know.
Just jinxed yourself.
I get you. And
yeah, to me, as I was saying earlier, one of the most amazing things about all these vintage shows is just, you'll always see the Polarises and Skidoos and Arctics there and stuff, and a smattering of Yamahas, but then somebody will show up with a Shark or a Viking or a this or a that, and you just never know what's going to show up.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. So then now you've expanding that concept, and you're having a Big East winter show. Tell us about that.
All right, that's right down the road from me here in Elbridge at the golf course. The Millstone Golf Course at O'Hara's Clubhouse there. So I started that show last year, and we had 120 sleds the first weekend in March. And we do a pancake breakfast, and they do a great job with it. And it started out great, and I only expect it to be bigger and better this year. So that'll be March 1st. Everything is at vintagesleds.com. If anybody's interested, go to the events page, and I have it there. Plus, I'll put in weekly just a reminder in the reader pages, the classifieds, about the show. But it's right off. It's 10 minutes off the New York State Thruway, right on Route 5 here in Elbridge. So I hope that's bigger and better this year.
Yeah. The and again, if people have never been to one of these vintage shows, they're such they're just filled with personality, both the personality of the snowmobiles and the personalities of the wacky people that put them together. It seems like everybody's got a story to tell. If you walk by the snowmobiles, they're neat, but then if you actually take the time to talk to the person that owned it, seems like every machine has a story behind it, that it was a barn find, and then you had to get the engine from some guy in Ohio, and then the hood came from a guy in Minnesota, and it's just it's really fascinating. And like you said, there's so many times there's a personal tie, and I had one of those when I was 8.
I can't tell you how many people come up and I'll start talking to them about the moto skis, and they'll go, "Well, my uncle had a Zephyr, long track Zephyr, or my grandpa had a MS-18 moto ski, and to meet those people, and you can tell they're just elated to see the sleds, and stuff. Oh, look at the moto ski. I knew I had one of them, or whatever. The guy could have a ski too, or whatever, ever brand. But they're going to talk to me usually about moto skis because that's what I have. But it's so much, I get so much enjoyment out of it.
So, as a person who has such a personal tie to all these things, how do you feel about the suddenly a bunch of sleds from the 90s being considered vintage? Obviously, they kind of have their own classes, but does that seem weird to also see XLTs and Formula Zs and Mach Zs as vintage?
Yes, it is. But you have to have you got to have that classic class. That's what we call them, the classics, okay? Because if we don't have them coming along, John, they're going to be the next vintage sleds. Is it going to catch on like us somewhat older guys have done? I don't know for sure, but I sure hope it does, that they'll carry it on and keep going with, the sleds that are 25 years and older. Like you were saying earlier, hard to believe, but that's where we're at, buddy.
I actually put this in a column in the magazine a few years ago, but I was working our booth at the Novi Snowmobile USA show in Michigan. And a couple of or a group of maybe about 5 guys that all looked like they were in their 20s was paging through some old Snow Goers and Snow Weeks that I had on the end of the table, and they were fascinated looking at some of the sleds from like 2002. They're like, "Oh, look at this! It's a 2002 Pro X. Oh my God! Can you imagine taking that thing around the track?" And they're making this big deal out of it. And some guy was across the table from me signing up for a subscription, and he looks down at them, and then he looks back at me and kind of rolls his eyes. And but at the same time, when I joined this sport in '93, when you think about it, 20-year-old sleds were the 73s. So why shouldn't a 20-year-old sled be as cherished to those guys as the 73s were to me in '93? So it works out, but it just seems weird as we get older.
Yeah, but now to see that, now look at my 70 or anybody's 1970, whatever. Look where they came to '93. What we used to ride with the tunnel-mounted engines, spitting gas all over your lap, but everybody says, "Oh, do you ride your vintage sleds?" I ride it about 10 minutes, but then I've had enough of it. It's tippy and everything else and keeping it right, But hey, look where it's came, and then now go from 90s to now, It's what we do, John.
Yep. The story's a tiny bit blue, but I think everyone who's a snowmobiler will take it in the vein it's intended. Several years ago, I was lucky enough to be riding with Gerard Karpik. And it seems like between the two of us, we were stopping every 10 miles because one of us had to pee. And he said, anybody who rode those old sleds hard has no bladder control anymore.
Oh, no, that's exactly right. But that's all we had, John, the suspension with bogey wheels and an inch of travel. Hey, it was the best thing in the world. I rode with that guy with the Ski-Doo, and it was a farmer, and we'd ride them, and they'd be tighten up everything the next night. We'd pull them in the barn, between the cows where they're somewhat warm, and wrench on them the next night. But we loved it. There are no trails, it was just
absolutely great. And whatever you're riding today is a lot better than what they were making 7 years ago. So what you're riding, whatever day today is, in the 1980s, you had sleds with shock absorbers, for God's sake. Those guys in the 70s were cavemen. Well, now we look at the people in the 80s and go, holy cow, how'd they ride those things down ditches? Someday someone will look back on us and think we're cavemen for what we ride today. It's just evolution.
I got another story, quick one. My dad drove tractor trailer, so I as a kid would go with him whenever I could. Christmas time, vacation. We're going up to Malone, New York with a load of lumber.
Okay.
Had to be 64, 65. We see this track along the road. I look over at Dad, what's that track along the ditch and going along? A few miles up the road, there was a Ski-Doo, because Elliott Hutchins was a distributor in Malone. There was a Ski-Doo pulled up in front of a house. Really the first sled as we knew them that we'd ever really seen.
Really?
Yep.
That's amazing because just even as a kid, I remember seeing all the tracks in the ditches and just being amazed at, I wonder what made those and where they went, where they were going. But I don't have a memory from back that early. That's incredible.
Yeah. That was something I remember. I going, Dad, what's that track? What's that thing going along?
Well, officially, I'm supposed to be keeping this show to about 35 to 45 minutes, and I have just blown past that. We're almost at an hour, so I'm going to spin you loose, my friend. It is always a great pleasure talking to you. I'm sure we'll talk on the phone again sometime in the next week or two. But again, for folks out east, make sure to check out Ron's Big East show that is March 1st. Give me the location one more time.
Eldridge, New York.
Okay,
perfect. Golf course. Vintage sleds, it's all there. And John, thanks for having us, and thanks for what Snow Goer does for the vintage community.
Well, thanks for being such a big part of the Big East.
No problem. Glad to do it.
Ron loose. He's gone. All right, now you're stuck with me for the wrap up of the rest of the show. So this again is Snow Goer Live, and I'm your host, John Prusak from Snow Goer Magazine. We are proudly sponsored by Z1R, maker of a complete line of helmets for snowmobiles as well as motorcycles. We're also sponsored by Arctiva, maker of a full line of snowmobile gear, jackets, bibs, boots, gloves. They've got it all at arctiva.com. And new this week, we're also sponsored by our new partner, Gates, with their G-Force drive belts for their drive belts for snowmobiles, certainly, but also for side-by-sides and ATVs and golf carts and a whole bunch of different things. You can learn about all of that at gates.com. So this weekend, as I said, for myself, tomorrow I'm planning to go to the Midwest Ride-In at ERX. That is always such a fun and fascinating event. I'm really excited to get out there. Typically, I go on Saturday. This year, I'm going on Friday because Saturday I'm planning on going riding. My good friend and former coworker Andy Swanson and some of his friends are headed up to northern Minnesota to a little secret location where they promised me the snow is going to be great. So Saturday morning I'll be up before sunrise, heading north with a sled or two and putting some miles on, because that's what this sport's all about. For folks in other parts of the world, I mean, the Wausau 525 races are going on, and oval racing. We got the Snocross that Carl talked about at Deadwood. I know there's a big drag racing event, but as much as possible, if you can get out riding, take that opportunity. So again, thank you for joining us. This is our weekly show that ran a little bit long tonight, but almost every Thursday during the snow season. I think we're going to miss one here in a couple of weeks because I'll be traveling. But Thursday, 7:30 Central Time. You can watch it here on YouTube. You can watch it on Facebook. You can catch it after the fact because it'll stay on both those channels, and we're also making a podcast version of it. So thank you for joining us, everybody. If you've got ideas for people you'd like to see for guests on the show, go ahead and drop it in the chat. But otherwise, we will get out of here and let you get on with your Thursday night. Good night, everybody.